Okay, so our objective for this lunch and learn is to help participants both document and amplify their DEI work for professional success. And this is true at Regis, but it's not just about at Regis. There is no academic institution I know of that is not actively working on equity and inclusion issues in a pretty major way. So that's the one thing we are going to be looking at the staff and faculty forms that we fill out annually and thinking about how DEI intersects with those. And then also hopefully to collaborate and build some community about both doing and documenting equity and inclusion work. And I think now I'm handing it off to Audrey.
Yeah, so I want to just kick it off and start by going through a couple of our definitions. And as Courtney mentioned, we want to make sure that we have the same terminology around equity to center ourselves and come together around a few of the key concepts that we have been discussing in our work. And with many of you, we've discussed this before, but our work through our Racial and Ethnic Justice Initiative work and the Inclusive Excellence Council, simply because varying definitions and views can often lead to misunderstandings or divergent objectives. And at its worst, it could erode trust among us, and that's not what we want. So, one of the most common ways equity work can be derailed is if we're using the same terms, but we're not using them in the same ways, or we have different understandings. And so that's why this is essential. The Inclusive Excellence Council, of which many of you are members, are working to implement all of these best practices. And I won't go through all of the terms we have workshopped together and defined together. And some of these are still ongoing. I'm just going to go through a couple of them. The first is diversity. It's on the screen. And this is everything that makes you unique, beautiful, and different. The reason why, your students love you and we love you. The other key term is inclusion. So when we talk about inclusion, what I want to center on here is inclusion is an action. It's an act or state of including, and being inclusive is an active and intentional practice. It's not just a thought. So you have to take those intentional, deliberate actions to incorporate all members' perspectives and ideas and tapping into our collective ability, because we're better and stronger together. And then the word of the day is equity. So equity here is the state, quality, or ideal of being just, impartial, and fair. And it's synonymous with fairness and justice. It's not simply a desire or a lofty set of values. It needs to be thought of as a structural and systemic concept. And then I have a definition of systemic equity here, and I can send the slides. So it's achieving those sort of parities and outcomes, regardless of race, ethnicity, or other identities, and moving beyond just mere access to the outcomes as their focus. So when we talk about equity work, we'll talk about broadly. I just want to talk a little bit about equity mindedness. So equity mindedness is the framework we're using from the Center for Urban Education and our Racial and Ethnic Justice Initiative. Equity mindedness is all of these concepts. It's evidence-based, it's race conscious, it's institutionally focused, it's systemically aware, and it's equity advancing. So when we practice these, it's when we as individuals question our own assumptions, our bias, our stereotypes that harm student success, and we're accountable to those and closing those racial and other gaps. And that's our personal institutional responsibility. So when we talk about this, equity is broad. We have race consciousness here because racism is so endemic to the United States, but I want to dispel any notion that equity work is simply just race work. And I think a lot of us get stuck in that. We don't think we're doing equity work unless we're specifically doing race work, which is also limiting in the sense of people who may not feel comfortable in those spaces or may not feel they have the right language. And so together we want to make sure that we are, yes, race conscious, but also thinking about ways in which our work advances those just outcomes and that we talked about, right? And then it's also evidence-based, that where it's data-driven and importantly, institutionally focused. So we're moving away from that deficit mindset, the idea that it's the students' actions or the coworkers' actions alone that is the cause of those gaps. So we're not saying like it's the belief that low income students of color fail because their families experience deficiencies that obstruct the learning process, but it's moving towards an equity mindset, saying that low-income students of color might have systems that they came into rooted in a history of inequality that is outside of their individual control or behavior, and that all individuals at Regis can succeed if the opportunities that we create become more equitable. And that applies to all of our identities. So we're working to promote awareness and understanding of those inequities. So again, while this framework is necessarily race conscious, when we talk about equity work, we're talking about anything that's calling attention to patterns of inequity and subsequent outcomes, and taking personal responsibility, personal and institutional responsibility for disrupting those patterns, critically assessing and reassessing our own practices, and being conscious and aware of social and historical practices that exclude or disproportionately impact historically marginalized, minoritized groups. So that's a lot.
Audrey, we have a question in the audience.
Sure. Kathy, yes.
Kathy.
I always have trouble unmuting. So I appreciate, Audrey Grace, where you said that it wasn't just racially related, because sometimes I feel like we get so focused on that we disregard other things. And I just want to make sure that when we're talking about equity, that it does include individuals with, like, all individuals, because even people of the same race are very different in their needs and their backgrounds. And sometimes what I see happening is we pigeonhole someone who is a certain race, expecting them to behave this way, and maybe providing them with not so much Regis, but I'm looking at school system, providing them with resources to help them bring them up to a certain level. But there are people who excel and there aren't resources to take them beyond, that average level. And same way, I see a lot of individuals with both learning and physical limitations that are left out of this equation often, because we become so focused on racial justice versus providing what each person needs individually, which is way harder to do, obviously. But
yeah, so my internet gave out midway through your question and I came back in, so forgive me if I'm not answering it completely, but and I know that Dr. Cole's going to talk next about how work that allows for everyone to access our education and what we provide and addresses those outcomes and disparities is equity work, but it's also race conscious in the sense that you're focusing on work that centers the most marginalized, the most excluded, and that work will advance everybody. Is that fair to say? I know, Courtney, you're going to talk a little bit about next about.
No, I mean, I appreciate this point, Kathy, and I guess the one thing I would say is that I think it's just important not to make addressing difference or doing equity work sort of oppositional, in the sense that somehow addressing race is going to be, there's a lot of research that shows doing racial equity work in the classroom helps everybody, right? And I think that's something that maybe I didn't know, certainly when I started doing this work. So I think it is having that lens, right, exactly, of the many different ways diversity is embodied and experienced, for sure. And ensuring that you are, yes, thinking about all of those ways is important. Yeah.
And I would just say, and again, I'm sorry I missed mid question, so forgive me if I'm not answering it fully, but we all are a multitude of identities and we're intersectional, and the work that we're doing to collect and disaggregate data will help us target those intersecting identities that are not achieving the same equitable outcomes that we set out for ourselves too. Okay, so with that, and again, you know, if I didn't answer your question, please forgive me, but I want to turn it back over to Courtney to talk about some of the work that is, or programs and opportunities that Regis provides that is doing this work.
I don't think I made a slide for this, did I?
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay. I was like,
You're the star of the show now.
yeah. Okay, good. This is why I don't use PowerPoint or just slide decks in my teaching, because I'm not like organized enough to know what's happening. So I think one of the things, and exactly to this point, it feels like we planted Kathy's comment a little bit in the presentation, is to think about the many professional development and particularly pedagogical opportunities that we have on campus. And I know some of these depend on what, you know, what, I don't know what the right language is. Erica can probably help me here. What type of faculty member you are, if that's the right, I don't know if type is the right word, but, you know, undergrad, grad, online, on ground, I feel like all of these are a little bit, they're a spectrum of identities, but we have had really great work related to UDL, Universal Design for Learning. That was a few years ago now. I don't know if anyone else, Kathy, I feel like you might have done that with me. Yeah, we did that with Edna and Kara. So now it feels like a long time ago. And that was really great. And that is a perfect example of, you know, UDL is is really about thinking about accessibility in your course and all the barriers a student might face in terms of being able to learn, understand, and succeed in your course. And that is the kind of thing that, although it is not a race-based or race-oriented approach, it no doubt, right, does definitely, thank you, Erica, it no doubt does address, right, the many different challenges learners might have in a particular course. So that's one thing. We did a lot of work. I think many of the people here, and part of probably why you're here, last summer did the summer, Title III summer institutes related to the syllabus and how to, I kept calling it decolonizing the syllabus, but I don't think that's quite the right word. It's my post-colonial bias, but that we're really thinking about, what does the syllabus do for learners? How can we create a syllabus that is more inviting and inclusive? And what are the barriers, or what are the ways we may be communicating unintentionally messages of exclusion, messages that are not clear to our learners, particularly those who maybe do not have parents or grandparents who went to college. That sort of hidden curriculum that often is embedded in documents like a syllabus. And then I'm in the midst, and I think others of you are too, of doing the open educational resources. I think Jane is here, our amazing librarian. I have to say, I'm and that's about how we find and use accessible and free or very reduced textbooks, not only textbooks, but learning materials for our students. And that's something that I have been doing. For example, I teach a public speaking class. Although there is a new public speaking textbook that's published every year, I can tell you public speaking has not changed that much in the last 1,000 years. So, right, and thinking about how do we create, how do we remove, and I know many of us have had that frustration of it being the 4th week and a student hasn't done their assignments and they're like, well, I didn't buy the book, and you're thinking, what? So just removing that barrier. And again, that is not an explicitly race or class or gender. It is about really thinking about what are the materials that are already freely available that we can avail ourselves of, and nonetheless, right, does address these issues of equity and inclusion. I think, are those the main things? So all of that to say, there's a lot. I know probably many of us are doing the micro credential. I'm going to screw this one up because it's so new, because I just got the email. I don't know, Erica, if you want to do a plug for your course, but I'm imagining that will be relevant. Okay.
Yeah, there's
Yes,
right now
I
there's inclusive teaching,
tell.
equitable learning, and then there's effective teaching practices.
Right, and so effective teaching practices, right, on its face is not necessarily about difference, diversity, equity, or inclusion, but I think, right, I don't know how you have effective teaching if you are not, right, having those practices that are attuned to and addressing issues of, yes, Erica can do her commercial probably better than, I'm just ad-libbing here, but.
Yeah, and so I think so all of this is to say, and then I can also say on the staff side of things that and anything that the things that we're doing to sort of think about different ways we assess our institutional practices, the things that we do to make our policies more clear, the work that we're doing to make sure everyone has the same information, the work that we're doing, and this is, you know, historically uncompensated, undercompensated, unrecognized racial equity work of being the person that students go to. And oftentimes there's very few of us that students go to because there's very few of us who look like that student. That work, the being there, the being present, to being that go-to person is also work that is equity work, that is valuable, and that helps think about how an institution can recognize and reduce those gaps in outcomes, right? And so this is why we want you to think pretty broadly about what you're doing. And it's not just, again, not just reading how to be an anti-racist, but it's thinking about effective teaching practices or different ways in which your office can be more accessible to students. And so thinking about that broadly. So what we'd like to—
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I just forgot quality matters, I realized.
Oh, yeah.
So quality matters is another one that we often as Regis faculty have the ability, I've done a couple of quality matters class, which it's free. It's yes, the effective teaching practices certificate. Yes, that's the one we just got the email about today. Quality matters, I feel like happens a couple times a year. We will get emails from academic affairs. Oftentimes it's either, you know, on Zoom, and it's great. Do you want to say something, Erica, about that?
I was just saying it's available. There's a cost, but it's free for you. And I'm
Yes.
the person facilitating it. And we will be resuming in campus at some point, but it has been on Zoom for the last few years, couple of years, if I could say that. And I just was also wondering if you would also speak to the faculty learning community around activities that within this.
Yes.
I don't know what all you're talking about, just really came to listen. So
No, I
Yes.
mean, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you know more about it than I do, but yes.
So faculty learning communities, so these peer models where we're really learning from each other in circle spaces, and essentially anything that Erica does that is equity advancing work, and that comes out of her office. Things that bring us together where we're talking and discussing about our practices, and using one another as resources to develop tools, because as much theory as we can learn and as much best practices we can get a checklist about, you know, talking to one another about how it's actually implemented in our classrooms, what's working, what's not, the different contexts where certain things work more than others has been really powerful in putting that theory to practice. And all of that is making our classrooms and our spaces more accessible, more equitable to everybody, right?
So, and I would just say then, what's been great about the last few years, and I know Erica, this is very much in line with Erica's form of leadership, which is very practical, right? So all of these opportunities, you end up with artifacts that you can use. So yes, and Lisa, what we are going to get to that point, right? But all of these are things where you're actually you're creating syllabi, you're planning courses, but this also becomes then a scholarship of application, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, right? This becomes actually the application of your understanding of how to do equity work in the classroom and in the programs in which you teach, right? So I think that is where, for me, particularly as a teaching school, right, as an institution that values learning, to the extent that we are engaging in more effective teaching around diversity, around better equity and inclusion, then so much of what you do then is a testament and is an artifact of that work.
And so I know everyone's putting things in the chat, but that's what we're going to do next. And this is billed as a workshop. So what we want to do is break out into faculty and staff breakout rooms and start talking to one another about some of the things that we've been doing that would fall under this broad umbrella of equity work. And this could be things of like books you've read that exposed yourself to an identity that was new and other than your own. It could be a workshop you've attended. It doesn't have to be Erica's workshops, although they're great too, list those. But workshops that you've attended that improved your understanding of something, conversations that you've had, that you've started with others, practices you've implemented, even any gaps and outcomes that you've noticed, that you've highlighted in your work, or even for student-facing staff, any sort of disparities you've noticed in the people who are accessing your services, and then, where you find out about those opportunities. So we're gonna go, and much, much more. So we're gonna go into groups. You'll be allowed to choose your own, either faculty or staff, and what you'll do is talk about these things and get to know one another. I understand it's a lunch and learn and you may be eating. Courtney and I are okay with that. If you have spinach in your teeth, as long as you don't spew food at the camera. We're okay
I just
with
want to
that.
say that there is a person in this lunch and learn who texted me once and was like, you are eating in every single meeting that we are in together. So cheers to that.
We're
Please feel free to
modeling.
eat.
Modeling. And then we're going to come back at 1:30. We're going to have a nice time to talk to one another and help each other think through things that we're doing, or even highlight to one another what we're doing that we might not think of as equity work. Does that make sense?
So we're building lists of things we're doing. Yes.
All right. Let me see if I did this right. Are you able to pick your room?
Yes.
All right. If you're not, I will move you.
Audrey, do you want me to go with what do you want me to do?
I want you to go with faculty. Yeah.
Faculty. Okay.
Can go ahead and put me.
I just got interrupted in the middle of my sentence.
There's a countdown.
I know.
I don't think
I'm usually in charge of the countdown, Audrey, so I'm not used to other people's countdowns.
I'm always in meetings where someone starts talking when there's 4 seconds left. I was like, don't you see the countdown? How was that for everyone to talk to your colleagues? Was it fun?
Nice, yeah.
Did you learn something new about the work that we're all doing, or other things that you would be interested in trying out? Okay.
Definitely.
I mean, like, an aspect of this is kind of like preaching to the choir, because it's people who sign up for these things. But the other thing about that is I learned recently this, when you're preaching to the choir, you could say, no, more so I'm organizing the choir. And the choir you take the each one reach one. So if we, the choir, can use an organizing mindset to bring other people into our choir, then we have so much more beautiful music comes out together, right?
Especially because they're different, depending on the discipline that you are coming from. Something similar, we may be doing something that is similar, but sort of miss an angle or 2 or 3. And so then, our colleagues in psychology, of course, have, so much to teach us. And so, yeah, it is it's very, very enriching, definitely.
And it's one of the best parts, I think, about working in higher ed is that there's so many experts in their disciplines, and sharing and talking among one another and what we can learn from one another. There's always another opportunity to learn. All right, with that, we're going to talk about our next part. Is that part of this is about documenting your equity work and turning it to ways in which all of the things that we've discussed, all of the work that we're doing, oftentimes, 1, we don't think about as equity work. 2, we don't write it down. So when it comes time, when someone asks you what you did this year, you have to go back through, what I do is go back through your calendar and say, where was I this past year? And then sort of figure it out, sort of backdate it, or look through my old PowerPoint presentations. So what we want to encourage people to do, and this will help with these things that we're doing to talk to one another, is start documenting and taking notes about what you're doing, any aha moments that you have. And we've designed a tool for you to do so. You can adapt it as you will, and I'll share.
Audrey, can I just say one thing
Yeah,
first? One thing that came out of the faculty discussion is a real exhaustion around how much work it is to do it, and feeling like documenting it just takes even more work. So I just want to insert that in the conversation, because I definitely hear that and feel that. And maybe we can think, you know, as we move into next year, what are some ways we can better support people doing this work? And this speaks to Erica's point that there's not enough sharing. You know, it ends up like it's happening, but we don't know. And then we're all sort of doing it in our little realms. So I just wanted to put that in there.
Yeah, that's completely real. And yeah, it is to do the work and then to like articulate what it meant to you is another reflective practices. It does take time. The tool we are going to share with you, I think, and I hope it acknowledges that this is an additional ask of people. And so we structure it in a way to give you some prompts, but also you can make it your own, and you can include as much or as little information as you want. The goal here is to just have you have a space where you could just take a note of what you've done. And so that when it comes time for you to talk about it to your program director, your supervisor, to your spouse, that you have it at the ready, and you don't have to spend 3 hours sitting down and typing it all out. It's asking you to think through, and we tied this to the performance review document and the FARs, to think through and make note, doesn't have to be very comprehensive, of what happened. So, it's essentially asking you, what was the date? And I do the date because it helps me when I need to go back to those slides or calendar invite to say, like, what really happened there. It's more of a memory trigger for me to have the date, a little brief description of what you've done. And then if you are inclined to do so, things of like the ways in which it enriches the work that you do. Now that is, if you are a more practical thinker, that is, how does it align with your job description or function? So when it comes to ask of it and saying like, how does this connect it to your work? And then connection to the department goals or strategic plan, that's the performance review FARs question, because you'll eventually have to articulate those connections. Your impact. And again, we're thinking of your equity impact broadly. And this is not asking you to put in numbers or data or outcomes or assessments, but it's just, again, a memory trigger. So you're putting something in there. What was the impact that you can articulate in the moment? And then any lessons learned moving forward. And then also, any possibilities for collaboration or community building. So thinking through like the new people you met today on this screen, who you connected with, who is that choir that you're going to organize? And again, this is a tool for you. It's not meant to add work to you. It's supposed to help you have those little memory triggers. The way I use this is honestly, I just print it out and I make a note mainly of the date and the title, so I know where to go back. But I'm also super anal and type A about how I save my presentations and my emails. I have an email folder that are very from my law firm days. So it's easier for me to just go back and to find that information. For some people that might not work for you. You might need more information here. Yes, and so there is a space where you can sort of articulate your broader goals. Again, the purpose here is to just give you a space and a framework that we have aligned with existing policies or practices, and so that you just don't forget. But it's also meant to acknowledge those small moments that you have. So, the small conversation you have with a student that maybe changed their trajectory in some way, or allowed them to see themselves more at home at Regis, or allowed them that space just to be themselves. It's to document those small moments that we often don't account for as equity work, and that we often don't account for in the time that we spend on campus or with one another, to just make note of that, and then also reflect on how you could do it better next time. And we'll send this to you. Does anyone have any questions about this? And again, I'll send you a link and you can download and change it however you want. Yeah, Karen.
So we were talking about this in the faculty group, Audrey. Many of us do this all the time. Mm-hmm. Like every single time we teach, every single time we have a meeting, every time, like it would be exhausting to fill out this form. for all the times we do it, which, I mean, it's a good thing that we're doing it that much, but do you have any suggestions on how to approach that? And,
Yeah, so you're saying like every time you go to a meeting, you have one of those moments, those equity moments that you want to document.
well, if it
Right.
happens several times in every class we teach,
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I would invite others for suggestions, but to me, I would think broadly about that too. So, so for example, I wouldn't put down each and every conversation I had with a student broadly, but I would put down sort of the category of information and the impact there. So thinking more broadly. So for a class that I teach, I would put down the class and any sort of impactful aha moments, and that would be at the end of the class. It wouldn't be each individual class, because yes, that would be exhausting after every class to say, this is what happened, and this is the lessons learned and the community impact, to think broadly about that too. But there's some things that you might want to, a particular book that you read that changed your teaching practices. That's a one-time thing that would be its own sort of category or line. But no, we're not asking you. And I know you have so many contact hours, interactions with students. You already do enough work, emotional, spiritual, racialized equity labor work. This is not adding to it. This is a reflection tool for you. So that when it comes time to communicating to others, that you have the structure, framework, discourse, and that you don't miss anything.
I think also too, and I hear you, Karen, and many of you, I know many of the psychology professors talked about that as well. I think your disciplines are very well sort of oriented to that work. But I think one of the things you also, that is helpful to think about, is that we take certain things for granted that particular audiences for these kind of documents do not. So that is why I think it can feel, I understand you can't write down everything, but I think to understand the labor that goes into a reading list that's balanced for gender, race, and nationality. Right. In my P&T application, I wrote about what that entailed, like the number of hours and all of that, because people don't really understand what that means. Or may not. I would not assume that they, and I think sometimes what happens is as we move in spaces where there are more of us who kind of understand what that means, I wouldn't need to explain that to you all. You all would know that that's a lot of work, but saying I made a reading list to someone who isn't thinking that way may not be clear about the labor involved. So I think that is also where sometimes we do, it is labor to document, because you are speaking to an audience that may be ignorant or may be skeptical, right? So part of this is also thinking about sort of, I would say as a communication professor rhetorically, about how we persuade, an audience to understand about the labor involved in doing this work, in teaching this way.
I will also share that, along those lines, that there might be, depending on your work, there might be more columns or areas that you focus more on, right? So in your work, if your field is, you have a balanced, equitable syllabus, you might want to focus more on the lessons learned and goals moving forward, or how you expand that community, as opposed to articulating each aspect of it, of like how it aligns with the strategic plan or your department goals. Because that's the work that when we come to these community spaces that you already have at the ready, you can share those resources. You can facilitate a lunch and learn like you did, but you already have it written up and articulated, and you already have a place where you can reflect upon and share what worked well and what didn't. I also use it a lot for when it takes me a really long time to write an email. That has to do with imposter syndrome, and also I'm a perfectionist. So it takes me a really long time to write an email. This also helps me have those phrases that I can cut and paste into emails to people when I talk about the work that we do or what we can do for other people too. So it's something that putting the labor in, you can go back to it later. You also don't have to use it at all. All we're encouraging you to do is to help write these down. Because again, to what Courtney said is so true, that when we take what we do for granted, when we take for granted the impact we're having on creating more equitable community, other people are going to take that for granted. right? What other questions or thoughts about this?
You mentioned, Courtney, I think you mentioned something about the FARs. And I haven't even read the template to complete it, to start working on it. But is it, I see.
So, yeah, so it was sent out yesterday. It was supposed to be sent out last week, but I just didn't get it. So I don't know what happens. Did
Okay.
everyone get it yesterday, at least? Okay, so it's not really that different. It's a clickable PDF. It's not as much weird white space.
Courtney, do you want me to share my screen and you can go through it, like your annotations?
Yeah, I can show you. Yeah, so what I did is I went ahead, I of course, because I didn't have the new one, did it on the old one and then redid it on the new one that we finally got yesterday.
Right, make sure to
I'll
write
put
down
that in-
inventory.
Yeah, I'm gonna put that on my equity work, wasted time because I didn't have the right form.
Which is a systemic problem that leads to extra labor that derails equity work. So there you go.
Right, so what I did is I basically annotated the form. Now, of course, in your committees, I didn't go as deep into the service because I just didn't have time, but these are all areas where I see the possibility of almost, depending on how you've done that spreadsheet, cutting and pasting into the form. So I think that mentoring new faculty, right, that can obviously have a very clear equity component, participating in or leading or, advising student groups. Even I know there's been some discussion in faculty committees about how we select students to sit on faculty committees. That is an equity discussion. So things like that. Sharing of expertise at Regis. This is obviously a very big one for any of you who are working with your faculty. So I know we've been working in my department a lot on getting close to 100% OER adoption in all classes. And that is equity work, right? And then we talked about this in the faculty discussion, but talking about recruitment, marketing, PR, and retention. I have written about helping students finish and the specific labor that has been involved with helping people finish their degrees. Students who may be navigating issues with financial aid, with challenges in their family system, all of those kinds of things that to me could go there under number 5. All of these parts should look pretty familiar. The values of the Sisters of St. Joseph, I think we know there's great overlay. So I feel like you could probably pretty much cut and paste your work there. So I think the assessment one, so the language in the assessment one is different. It used to be very vague. It's now much more specific about 1 to 2 things. But I think you can think about, work you've done to try to make a more equitable and inclusive learning environment, either because of or in anticipation of assessment. I will just say also too, I have done some things that were like kind of a disaster. Like I did one in the fall. I was like very excited and it just was terrible. And I felt, but then I had a conversation with Diana Purdue and we sort of talked through what happened. And she was like, no, I think this is great. And this is like such a valuable learning opportunity for the faculty. And so now I'm going to write about it for the Teaching at Regis blog, right? So that's sometimes too, you need that conversation with someone else to realize even what it means. Obviously teaching philosophy, they really have a focus on your evolving teaching philosophy, which for me is a little bit strange. It's not like every year my teaching philosophy changes, but that is a place where you could talk about maybe if you've added or modified because of equity work. And we can think about, all of our journey to be equitable and inclusive educators as a sort of dynamic process. Curriculum design, it talks a lot about new courses and programs. I would really encourage you all to document work you've done in existing courses, different assignments you've done. Can and should be listed there. I don't believe curriculum design and should really be just about new stuff. And again, right, that's the bias of the form. I would write this form differently, obviously. Academic
I should say, like,
advising.
full disclosure, like these annotations are Courtney's and mine on the
Yeah, sorry, these are like very unofficial. These are not, this is what I am thinking about. So the yellow, all the green, all the green and red is sort of my commentary. The yellow is the only place where DE&I are explicitly mentioned in the FAR. But you can see that there's all these other places, right, where we can put it and where we can document it. So that it is not, because basically I can just tell you, when I was a junior faculty member, and this predates, lots of new leadership, but they were like, well, you can do number 6, but like only in addition to everything else. And then after tenure, you can do it. And I was like, well, like, no, that's not right. And so that was part of my challenge, was to sort of document in a way that made the case that, no junior faculty member should ever be told that.
And we have the benefit though of these being in the strategic priorities in our new strategic plan. So while not, if this is part of the work there, and I know that there has been conversations about tying your goals to the strategic plan, and even participating in the lunch and learns is something that has been noted as valuable in those conversations.
So, and then I went through, they have the 3 other domains other than teaching here. And what I put in some language actually from the old FAR document that sort of gave all these different examples, which I think they just took out for space. But I think, again, to think about the way in which things that you may have listed further up in the document, right, also count as scholarship, right, and should be included here. Kathy, yes, you have a question.
So it's more of a comment. I think this is really helpful, Courtney, the red things that you've filled in, because I've always felt like there's a lot of things, and staff probably feel this way too, but faculty, there's a lot of things that we do that there's no place to include it on the FARs. And you feel like you're doing all this other service and there's no place to put it. And I still feel like there's sometimes no place to put it, but I think your comments about how to include this are really helpful.
Let me,
yes, thank you. I think also too, sorry, I think the other thing is, even if you don't put everything in the FAR for yourself, it's important to have a record of it. Should you want to, if you got nominated for an award, a disciplinary award, right? If you wanted to pursue other employment, not that we want that, we want you to stay, but I think there's a lot of good reasons for yourself to really be making sure you just have a good repository of all that you've done. And I agree, like, it's not perfect. I just sorry, Audrey, you were trying to get in here.
No, I was just going to go quickly through the staff one. So then,
yes, please do.
We're gonna do another quick breakout where we talk about it in these different documents and how we would fill them out. The other thing is then again, the inventory is supposed to help you fill these out. However, I mean, you can, what Courtney did is also great. You can also work from the existing document, take your notes in there. So this is obviously based off the old strategic plan. I know that Joan's working on a new performance review process to make it more equitable. So I followed Courtney's model. I added some red text, but the staff have to do a self-appraisal worksheet. And so this is a little bit more freeing than I think the faculty FARs, is that you can really go broadly with this. I do encourage you to talk to your supervisor about this too. So to make sure you're having that conversation about what you're going to do with the space and articulate it here. And so it has the, equity work is connecting it to your position, your job performance, as well as the strategic plan. And then any challenges is from the lessons learned section. So this is things where, you may have hit some barriers or you need support or resources. This is also really important to document because that's where we can come into the space together and get information, ask questions. We don't know what we don't know until we talk about it. So having input and feedback from everyone about what other resources we need would be important. And then we have goals moving forward. And so the staff performance review also has these sort of check boxes. It has a mission. I highlighted that yellow because inclusive excellence is part of our mission. And green, if you think about, takes a broad view of your job, is recognizes other and looks to expand job knowledge and skills. So that is also equity work if you're doing the work to think beyond and to grow in your position. For additional responsibilities, awareness of and accountability, things that you can sort of tie to the work that you're doing, to learn more, to create more accessible spaces, to notice those gaps and outcomes, and to highlight those systemic factors that you encounter in your everyday job. And then also helps anticipate potential problems and is also innovative. So connecting it to those works, again, thinking broadly of how your equity work can apply. Also interpersonal skills. So talking.
I think the other thing I would say as I'm thinking about this is, you know, to the extent that you're keeping track for yourself, I think it is important. I mean, I would be curious what other people, and maybe we can talk about this in the breakout, but like document it in a way that's meaningful for you. There will be places to put it on the floor. I think that is really the big takeaway that I want, you know, which is like, you need to decide like what and how the work you're doing matters. But I think that once you do that, there's plenty of places you can put what you're doing. And so I think, you know, when I first started here, I really started with the FAR as the kind of framework for quantifying and thinking about what I'd done each year. And I think it's helpful sometimes to step away from those bureaucratic forms to really think in a more substantive and holistic way about like, what have I actually done? And then plug the things into the document. I don't know if that's too anti.
No, I mean, I think, and that's why we design the inventory separately, and to have you think broadly about it too. And invite you to talk about the language of the institution, but it's also more, again, more for you. You know, it's helpful, like even updating your LinkedIn profile with these lists of things, right? Like, because you're keeping a running list of things that go forward too. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into another quick breakout for about 20 minutes. And then we are going to talk of same groups, faculty and staff, to talk about things that you're feeling, any challenges to this. You can even say it's still too much work, we're never going to do this, but thinking about other ways you can have those conversations with one another, and even how you have that conversation with your colleagues, with your supervisors, with the powers that be. Yeah, let's see. Oops, does that make sense? We started talking about, well, I started talking about metal detectors. So I think we're a little punchy right now.
I tried to give Courtney a visual for the countdown since I know you didn't see it.
I saw it this time, but I was like, well, I'm not ending on a very positive note. So it was like, and it's a lot of work and we're all tired and I'm sorry. Lunch, we'll figure out a lunch and learn for that next year.
Being tired. Yeah, so really, the goal here is just to make it easier for you. And then we were talking in our staff group about, in some respects, to like celebrate yourself and pat yourself on the back. So to celebrate those small moments that, you know, to recognize yourself in that space, and then you're much more equipped to share with others. The other thing I want to mention as we come to a close, and then we can open up for any other questions, is that there's other sort of ways in which we celebrate you. And so one is to host and facilitate a lunch and learn, and then we can feature you in the wonderful work that you're doing. And many people on the screen have done that. And so thank you. The other is we have pride points, we have presence notes, we have Pride of Regis nomination forms. It's the structure we have in place to recognize ourselves and to sort of put our names out there. And to feature ourselves. And it's really helpful for me to read all of your names in those locations. So when someone asks me for a speaker or someone asks me for a resource, I know what you're studying, what you're researching, what work you've done, and then can refer other opportunities around too. And that's the other thing we can do. We can nominate each other for awards and speaking opportunities and all that to help elevate the work that we're doing, because we're all connected to different organizations. and different opportunities that can really feature people too. I know Becky was on a podcast, so that's good. Yeah. And there's also in writing and the teaching a Regis blog that also gets your name out there and celebrates your work and what you can do. And yeah, anyone have any thoughts, questions, or everyone's just exhausted?
It's an interesting thing that how you just said that, because when we first started looking back on what we've done in the last 2 years, I was like, that podcast, that was last summer. Like I was amazed because it felt like it had been a long time. But to speak to your point, the president's notes, there's one listing of, here's a podcast that Becky did, listed back in September. How do we make this more iterative, if that makes any sense? Because, we often miss these kinds of things of, oh, what did Karen do? Or, going to the talk on intersectionality. Oh, great. I forgot. I should put that on there. But how do we return to these things in a developmental way? So it's that spiral up, I think is a good question to ask. I don't have a great answer, but I thought I'd ask the question.
I think we need a digital repository that is available to Regis faculty, staff, and students. And that could be a place where those sorts of things can be put. And if it's curated correctly, it's accessible so that you could keyword, oh, I remember Becky did this awesome podcast. Where is that? And there it is.
Yeah, I've been at an institution that had digital measures, and it was really nice because someone was saying, the FARs are sort of confidential, right? Because they're also an evaluation. And yet there's so much richness there that we need to share, and thinking about NETCHI and all of that. So Audrey, you and I have a little work to do on that piece, and thinking about, beyond the FARs, how do we, and Jane, we've talked about digital measures. What's nice about that too is then when you do your FAR, if you've updated stuff as it happens, then it just creates this PDF with no work. So that is also like a pretty magical thing to do at the end of the year. So maybe we can think about that as we move into next year. And NETCHI time would be a good time to be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, like my anally organized email folders, I keep them all in one folder. So I'm just searching for names in one folder, keywords from one folder. But again, that's just me. Yeah, you're right. I think this is something that we need to do, and it's not, it's done before. It's not impossible. And we have all the information, right?
And the curated aspect of it, because you've sent so many documents in the Regis group, the DEI group, the OER group, to have a curated repository would make it a little less overwhelming. But it's tough because there's more out there than any of us can possibly consume. But it is nice to have shared documents that everybody in the psych department read, the law article that you had said, and various things like that. So really trying to find a way to find the right balance between sharing documents and sharing resources without overwhelming all of us.
No, I thought that was a project wasn't there a summer institute about sharing resources?
The continuity one?
Yeah.
I don't think it was quite, I think that was more for students than faculty.
Okay.
That was the goal, my understanding.
I don't know. I mean, the other thing is, I don't know if any of you are involved in ITS's new Regis resources.
Oh, Sharp.
Sharp.
Yeah.
Spike Sharp.
How many of the?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. You muted yourself at the end. Can you say again?
Yeah, you didn't want to interrupt you. It seemed like you wanted to.
No, I always look like I'm about to say something.
Did you? I want to know if somebody knows, maybe Jane, how much we use resources that are already available. I have this feeling that every time that there is a new resource, it's going to take time from me instead of freeing time from me. It's going to be another effort that is not going necessarily to be translated into feeling better and working better, but is working more.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, everyone said libraries and librarians were going to be done. We wouldn't need them. We're not having them because of the internet. And
Blasphemy.
exactly. But what happened was before it was you needed a librarian to find the little pieces of information and pull them out for you. And now you need the librarian to stand in front of the fire hose and find out where the little pieces of information are because there's so much. I think that it's very difficult, and it is definitely subject specific to figure out what is going to be helpful. I think that we try and focus our emphasis on now moving towards more OER, open access materials. But again, it's not easy, and it's not a one and done kind of thing. So I think that piece of it is really difficult, but the research guides help. The faculty research guide helps. We, as you know, Manuel, we'll work with you. And sometimes there isn't an open access or an open educational resource. It's got to be created. And that's what this committee has been working on, was to understand how that would work as far as staff time, faculty time to work on that. Does it involve a sabbatical? Does it involve time out of class and things like that? And that's like way above my pay grade. I don't know who makes those decisions, but not me.
Heidi, were you? No. What other thoughts do we have, everyone? All right, in conclusion, this is important work. You're all doing really important work. The more we talk about it, the more we share with one another, and the more we, in whatever spaces we have, we push to institutionalize the value of this, the better it is for everyone. And it becomes more embedded in our practices. And then we will better serve our students and our colleagues. Then
Yeah,
I'll stop the recording in case anyone wants to disagree with me.